Hi there, my name is Teffo, Research and Data Lead for OpenUp, and today we will be walking you through Wazimap's Rich Data View, going through how you access Rich Data View from the Data Mapper view, as well as how to make sense of the charts that it displays in Rich Data View, and how you can also download these charts as well as the data. So next up is how to navigate to the Rich Data View from Data Mapper view. Okay, so when you land on Wazimap, you will land in the usual data mapper view, which shows you the left-hand panel with your profile indicators and the map as you see it here. The biggest difference between Rich Data View and Data Mapper view, before we get into navigating to Rich Data View, is that in Data Mapper, you'll recall that when we have the geography selected, so in this case, level 1 country, which is South Africa, we are viewing the level 2 geography's data, so in this case, provinces. So just a quick recap, that means that when I select a profile indicator, although we're at the South Africa level, we are looking at data for the provinces. When we're looking at Rich Data View, we are actually then going to be looking at data for that particular geography that's selected. So in this case, level 1 country. And the way we get to the Rich Data View for South Africa in this case, there's two methods. We can either click over here where it says Rich Data View, and it'll open up the Rich Data View panel. Alternatively, we can click this rich data chart icon at the top here. And these tabs are also how you navigate then between Data Mapper and Rich Data. And again, just to reiterate, you can see that in Data Mapper view, we have South Africa selected and are therefore viewing the provinces. But in Rich Data View, because we have South Africa selected, we are viewing data for South Africa. In the next section, we'll look at what data is displayed here and how to make sense of it. Okay, so we've successfully navigated to Rich Data View, in this case for South Africa. And the first thing you'll notice when you get to Rich Data View, right underneath the geography name, is this location section. And what this alludes to is all the points that are in South Africa. And you can view which points there are. So in this case, we have points under public services, water and sanitation services, and justice and protection services. And you can either download each point collection on its own, or you can just download all the locations. And what this will do is download a whole bunch of coordinates with information. And these actually relate to Point Mapper, but we will be covering that in a subsequent video. After the locations is the first profile indicator, just to show you these indicators. So Census 2022, 2011, 2001, 1996. They correspond with this part here in the left-hand panel in Data Mapper view. And similarly, the Census 2022 only data, that corresponds with all the profile indicators that fall underneath this category. So once we land there, we'll see that the first profile indicator is population by census year. And this information, because it's showing you the absolute value, so the total number of people in South Africa for each year, we're using a line chart to plot this data. And when you hover over the line chart, you'll see that at each census year, it will show you the total number of people. So in 1996, we had roughly 40.5 million. And in 2022, there was 62 million, more or less. The indicator also has an indicated description at the bottom here, as well as the source where the data comes from. And then the same data that is used to plot this line chart is also displayed in a table at the bottom. We can also download this chart, save it as an image over here in the top right-hand corner, or we can download the data that's being used in the chart as a CSV, Excel, or JSON file. And finally, we can also apply some filters to the chart. So we might be interested in only a particular age group, let's say 40 to 49, and you'll notice that the chart updates accordingly, and so does the information in the table below. To get rid of this particular filter, you can just open up this dropdown and hit all values. So the next profile indicator we get to by scrolling down, and we'll see that this one is population by sex. Now, in this particular one, we're only viewing data for one census when we land on it, and you'll see it says so in the description. By default, this indicator displays the proportion or percentage of female and male persons for the selected geography, so South Africa, as recorded in the 2022 census. So the biggest difference between this chart and the line chart we saw above is that this one, we can add multiple census years data to the same chart. So at the moment, it's just 2022 data, but we can, for example, add another census years data. Let's just choose 1996, and you'll see it adds it to the chart in a new color. And so now we can compare the data for female versus male persons for both 1996 and 2022. By default, it shows the percentage split, so the share. So we can see that in 1996, there were 51.9% females, and in 2022, 51.5%. If we wanted to see the actual values and not just the percentages, we can come up here to this menu and we can toggle value. And so now it actually shows you the absolute values, and you can see just how much the number has increased for each subgroup of the population. And to go back to percentages, we just toggle percentage, and it now shows us the percentage split. This data, again, can be downloaded in CSV, Excel, or JSON, and you can also download an image of this chart. One thing to note when you're adding multiple census years is that the table won't be available when you're comparing multiple years. So in order to see the data in a table, you have to select one census year of interest, and then the data will appear in that table. You could also select one other census year, and then the data similarly pops up. The main thing is just that if you have more than one census year selected, it disappears, but it'll come back as soon as you have a single selected. And again, we can add other filters if we want. So we might be interested in only the gender split of a particular age group. And we can see there, for example, that for those aged 80 to 89, there's a much higher number, in this case, of female persons versus male persons. And if we go to percentage, we'll see that it matches pretty much up with the percentage too. So roughly 69% female in 2022 and only 31.4% male in 2022 for this particular age group. So all the other indicators underneath this theme, so those running from 1996 all the way through to 2022, they all operate in the same manner. When you get to the indicator, it'll be by default selected to show you the 2022 census. You can add other filters if you're interested to see that. You can add other census years to your chart. You can also toggle again between percentage and value. And you can save it as an image or download the data that's feeding into the chart. The same would be true for population by age group, and things only really change when we get to the census 2022 only data. And the main reason it changes is that we only have data for one census year, so we're not going to be able to compare multiple census years. But more on that in the next section. Okay, so now we're looking at census 2022 only data, meaning that this data is only from the census of 2022 and we don't have any other census years we can compare against. However, this is still very useful data to have a look at for your geography of interest. In our case, we're still sitting at the South African level, so this is all data for the country as a whole. So the first profile indicator, and just to remind you one more time that this corresponds to these profile indicators in Data Map View. In this case, we're just looking at them for South Africa, and you can quickly get to it by just toggling these little menus on the left-hand side. And so we see that the first profile indicator for which we have 2022 data only is the number of households. Now, because we only have 1 year's worth of data, it doesn't make sense to do a line chart. So we display this data on a single bar chart. And because it's the total number of households and we're showing the absolute value, it only gives us the value. There is no percentage split. So similarly, we have our chart. We can download the chart as an image. We can download the data behind this chart in various formats. We have our profile description, indicator description right here. And then we have the data in a table as well. Moving on to the next profile indicator, which is household by size. Again, you'll see that we have the chart, which shows us the various household sizes. So 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 or more people. And in this case, it's showing us the percentage split by default. So meaning that 26.1% of households in South Africa are a 1-person household, whereas 20.6% are 5 or more people living in the household. We have our indicator description at the bottom as usual. The same data displayed on your chart is displayed in this table. And you'll notice that the table gives us both value and percentage, and we can actually toggle which one to display in the chart by using this menu at the top, and we can simply toggle between percentage and value, and you'll notice that the actual numbers change accordingly on the chart. We can also apply some filters to this indicator. Maybe we're interested in the sex of the head of the household, so we're interested for households where it is a female person that is the head of the household, and you'll notice how the chart updates accordingly when you flick between them. And so now we can see that roughly 14.8% of households that have 4 people in them are headed up by a female person. And if we contrast that with male, we'll see that for the same size household, it's only 12.4%. And once again, this applies similarly to all the other subsequent indicators that are for 2022 only. So over here, we're looking at the sex of the household head. Again, by default, it'll show you the percentage split. You can go and toggle the values by hitting the value there. You can again download this data in various formats, and you can also save the chart as an image. The data appears here in the table as it usually does, and the indicator description is underneath the chart. And once again, we can add filters to this chart if we wish to do so. So all of these indicators work the same way. Because there's only one census year's worth of data, that's what you're looking at. So you're looking at data for 2022, and you can add multiple filters and download the chart or the data. And as you scroll down through the different indicators, you'll see how the subheadings change. So now we're looking at language data, for example, and this shows us that most people in South Africa, so 24.3% of people in South Africa speak Zulu, whereas, for example, only 8.7% speak English as their most spoken language. Then we move on to education data, looking at stuff like ECD attendance, highest level of education, which in South Africa is the matric or grade 12. And finally, we have field of education, which just shows you the field that most people have gone to study in. Largest one being education, and then you can also see engineering and business economics and management sciences quite high there on the chart. And then we have some service data, so access to piped water, toilet facilities, energy and fuel used for cooking, energy and fuel used for lighting, access to refuse or rubbish services. And then finally, we end off with some migration data. So this one's quite interesting. It'll show you the number of people born in a country that is not South Africa. So for example, in South Africa, if we scroll down this long list of countries, we'll see that most people who are not born in South Africa but live in South Africa were born in Zimbabwe. And there's, just to illustrate or highlight the point, it is highlighted here to say that this particular indicator is for people who are born not in South Africa, and so anyone born in South Africa is not included in this particular data set. And at the end, we'd end off with the province of previous residence. And so this then concludes Rich Data View. Once again, it's essentially showing you the exact same data that would be in your data mapper view, just that you're looking at the detailed data for the geography that you're at. So we're at the South Africa level. So in data mapper view, just to refresh your memory, you will be looking at data for the underlying geographies, so the provinces. Whereas in Rich Data View, because we're at the South African level, when we click Rich Data View, we are now looking at data for South Africa. In our next video, we'll be looking at Point Mapper. Thank you.